Welcome again to another episode of Electric Sociological Sing and Think Along. The general heading and reminder I was going to start with is that there is nothing going on at the atomic, cosmic, or animal level that is not going on in man. And this is a physically, organically, minerally correct fact. And specifically, for a whole new view, we will go back and at least symbolically start off with those great teachers, the canines. Just as dogs materially mark off their spatial territory, as does man at a certain level, but as dogs do that, life has man doing likewise in the area of other people's minds. Now, before I get there, you might note this is not all that much of new information, but at a very basic level, that you could say the red circuit level, you have men at that cruder level also operating not unlike animals, not unlike a dog that people do mark off. Men are doing it if you see a group of, I'll say men, even with a small m or a large m, that you will see people marking off their territory by the way they stand. If you see a group of guys standing around at a work site or in a bar, you walk in, and they will do it by the way they walk, whether they're swaggering or their heads down. This has been noted, and it is a reality. They are, in a sense, marking off territory. But you people are too civilized. I have not had much success. Are we having in attracting good bricklayers and armed robbers to this sort of thing? Or out-of-work dictators? It's of very little importance, although it is quite real, and that is why I was adding that there is nothing going on not only at the atomic and cosmic, but the animal level, which we have got in common, though not a perfect parallel, but it is in common with the little furry creatures here in this 3D world. So that being said and that being known, there is an area that has never been perceived as such, wherein man is marking off territory. But he is doing it not at the spatial level, that is, not at the territorial spatial level, but people are doing it to one another, attempting to mark off your territory and other people's psyche, in the widest sense of psyche, not any kind of new age, but psyche as opposed to somatic. Somatic, that is not the physical aspect at the red circuit level. It is specifically in the nervous system, and it is super specifically in the intelligence of other people. It is talk. It is man using words as a kind. It's talk being verbal urine. But this is very specific, and it is something that has never been noted on our planet up until now. And now we're in for it. Well, we have been talking about this same sort of thing leading up to it for several weeks now. But surely some of you can see this, and I think that you will be able to perceive more about the operations of life at the secondary level of man, the civilized intellectual level. People talk to one another, and part of what is going on very specifically, once you see it, there's no doubt about it, very specifically, they are verbally, in a sense, raising their leg, and you're attempting in other people's minds and their intelligence, you're attempting to mark off an area as yours in their minds. And they're doing the same to you. The whole general area, other than just some passing of little consequence, such as the old thing of, hey, Mac, what time is it at a bus stop? And the guy says 5 o'clock, and you say, thanks. Other than that, to give you some way out, a place to stand while the flood runs up above your ankles. The flood of reality. Other than that, the rest of human verbal intercourse is people offering to one another what? Their opinions, their disagreements, and above all, telling everyone else what kind of guy you are. In the secondary world, regarding intellectual man, which we'll assume everyone that might be exposed to this would qualify, life has placed in man a drive to get into other people's minds that is as strong as the more primary drive as it is for people to get in one another's knickers. It is, in fact, if you could find an area, which you could relatively in this day and time, but if you find an area wherein talk has not become almost as powerful and attractive as sex, then you're talking about a place where the secondary world has yet to take hold. That if you wanted some real electric psychology, if we were going to do that, and if in some way you were trying to make it a vision, or you're trying to give a right up to the minute definition, operational definition of what being civilized is, as opposed to some area, relatively speaking, perhaps on this planet that would be less civilized, but still post-literate, post-verbal, but still in a more sublime, subtle manner, you could divide it up into just what I've said. If you found an area, either apparently out there or in yours or someone else's nervous system, wherein talk had not become as strong, as powerful almost, we'll say, as attractive as sex itself, then you would be talking about a place that, relatively speaking, is not all that civilized yet, wherein the secondary world is not in full root and growing. Withal, look at our day and time. Now, I know that people still do it, thank God. Sex is still powerful, but look at our day and time. It's not right or wrong, but just look. Would it be absolutely incorrect to say that talk itself, of all forms, that talk is now almost as strong, almost as of much interest, even between the sexes, as screwing is itself? In our day and time, I hate to keep blaming it, which I'm just doing it pictorially, on Geraldo or Oprah. But you would think that people will sit around, men and women, and talk as much about screwing, not screwing, when it's good, when it's bad, when you should do it. If you do it with people with different signs than yours, that people will talk nowadays, apparently, as much or more about it than they would to do it. You still must have, of course, the primary, what we've been calling the primary interest, the primary drives of life of sex and keeping the race going and protecting oneself, eating. All of that still has got to take, from a more manifold view, has got to take precedence over anything to just keep the race going of man. But sex is just one area to point out, because I could use food and say that in a sense in the secondary world, we've covered this sort of in passing, that the more a world is secondary, the more that you are involved in the good secondary civilized interest and activities, that you could, quite conceivably, people do it, talk as much about dining as you actually, the time you spend eating. Of course, it could be also tied into sex, to whoever your lovers are, that you spend time talking about. Where to eat tonight, where we'll go next weekend, or should we drive all the way or fly down to Freeport to a brand new place. And it's part of the hobby of secondary life. But the area in which, this may seem easy enough to point out in the beginning, but the area in which I'm trying to get you to consider is, this is serving a purpose. It is not just social cement. It is not just little innocuous verbal byplay that people are doing to kill time before they die. There is something quite specifically going on. And it's going on at a level that the ordinary intellect cannot see, would never think of, and it is, by one valid description, it's each person at the secondary level, not the primary. You have to take it to the secondary level to get any sort of view of it. The ordinary conversations, the swapping of opinions, the disagreements between people, people expressing their belief in this and that, just in general telling what kind of guy I am, and another person saying what kind of guy they are, or telling what they think about what kind of guy you are. It is quite really that you are attempting to mark off a territory in their intellect, in their mind, that you mark off that in a sense, nobody of course analyzes in these words because it is an energy transfer, and I'm just using words to clothe it enough to look at it, to make some shadow puppets with it. It is as though you are attempting, through what you say to the person, and assuming that you're involved with a fairly serious energy transfer, that is, that the other person is, for a few seconds, a few minutes, actually listening, going, yeah, waiting their turn for you to, shut up, and then they go, all right, let me tell you what kind of guy I am, or tell you what the parts I agree with part of that, and part of it I don't. And you go, okay, I'll listen. You are attempting to get in their brain. You're talking, and they're listening, and to, as it were, lift up your leg and to mark off an area that they will remember. That you say something like, well, I'm going to tell you what. I used to be a follower of the wool religion. I grew up. I went to wool schools and I did all that. And I'm going to tell you what. I found out, and you make some real strong opinion like, I'm going to tell you what. I believe there's some kind of conspiracy that the wool religion is tied up in some way with sheep herders in Spain, and they're going to try to take over the world and wreck the economy. Another person goes, I never heard that. You go, you mark my words. Because it's always good to, some sort of portent, some sort of harbinger of bad things to come, which is another reason we've talked about before, but that is another reason, by the way, another aspect of why all news seems to be bad news, why the majority of what people say from a certain view seems to be bad news. In the full sense of the word, gossip, of talking about other people, and it's always either the other people are doing something bad, they're dying, they have died, or it's somebody that apparently operates on a larger level, like representing some institution in society, somebody from the government, and they'll be interviewed and they can't resist. The final thing they'll say is something like, well, I hate to say it, but I am foreseeing some bad problems in the economy coming up in the next quarter. They'll want to end up on something that seems to be bad to where people go, ooh, what if he's right? What's going on? Part of it is to threaten, to predict dire consequences. It's kind of a smellier verbal urine than it is if you just said something that's sort of Pavlovish. All right, innocuous again. I hate to say it twice. That it's kind of namby-pamby, beige, bland, rather soothing, undisturbing. That is not the way to mark off. It'd be like a dog coming up to a bush he wants to mark off, and instead of raising his leg and actually pissing on it, is maybe just go by the bush and try and look at it, and maybe kind of just raise his leg a little, and maybe just kind of threaten the bush to where maybe in some way the bush goes, and I don't know how, but puts out its own smell, or next time another dog comes by, the bush says, hey, somebody has already been here. It has got to be, in a sense, poignant, meaningful, and threats, predictions of untoward, negative consequences, is one of the better ways, the way humanity's brains are arranged, for someone to apparently make their mark on you. It's for you to make some comment that, you don't look good. I've been feeling all right. Have you seen a doctor? Now, you can take something like that and bring up the examples fairly common and make it sound silly if that was the point. But think about the way I'm telling you. The conversation, part of what's going on between people, is trying to mark off, I mean this literally, that you are, by your words, attempting to get inside their brain, in their mind, and to mark off a place to where they'll remember you. Now, don't take just psychologically, because that's not all it is. That's bad enough. That'd be astounding enough. It is that you are attempting to literally mark off a place in their intellect that they remember you. They may think about that they remember something you said. Well, I can't remember. Yeah, I remember that guy. I'm not even sure of his name. But Jesus, he's the guy that was trying to tell me something about the world church was in some kind of conspiracy. I've been looking for a book on that. So in other words, they may look at you and can't remember your name, or at least your middle name. But they remember what you said. Think about it. It's just what I'm telling you. That you made a verbal mark. You did a verbal P job in a certain place in their brain, and you sort of own that corner, that one little piece. Every time they hear now the word conspiracy, every time they hear some mention now of the world religion, which used to, they were well read. Maybe they heard it once a day. But now, like once a day, every time they hear it, they remember what you said. That nutty thing, well, I hope it was nutty. This guy was talking about some kind of conspiracy that they were in. You have, in a sense, marked off a territory in somebody else's mind that you now own. And of course, you may have done that, and the other person said, have you ever been under psychiatric care? You think, Jesus, what a thing to ask me. I was trying to carry on a conversation. I don't need this kind of crap. And so you may always remember now he's marked off something in your mind. You was trying to help the guy, so he wouldn't fall into the nefarious hands of those wool-gathering church people. And so you try to tell the man something decent, to mark off a place in your brain, his brain. He says, even if you can't afford it, most counties of the state, they have some walk-in psychiatric clinics, I'll be glad to drive you over. So you may not remember his name. But now it may be that almost every time you think about this wool church and shepherd conspiracy that you had in mind, that now very often you think about him and that guy looking you dead in the face and kind of smirking and saying, have you ever sought out psychiatric advice or care? And now you keep thinking that. You understand that the man is marked off a place in your mind. We have talked about some of this in another sense, but there is another kind of sort of outsiders, outside the city view that now some of you should be able to expand the other way that we had talked about this particular thing. And it has to do with the diversity that from many reasonable, even city views, the diversity of man's opinions. Not man at the primary level, not the difference in people physically, but what would seem to be this unique, the world of the intellect, the secondary world, this, from certain views, almost apparently unprofitable diversity. The conflicts, that people are no longer, for instance, from one city view, fighting over territory, that nations do not any longer go to war over that, they go to war over secondary matters, that is, ideas, political, economic, philosophies, religions. And so, from certain views, life has some of its own spokesmen inside of the race of man saying there are too many views. We should have like a one-world government, or if we could come up with a one-world language, or if we could come up with just one-world religion or no religion. That we've got so many diverse and inflammatory opinions that people hold it, from a reasonable. I'm speaking now for ordinary people in the city. They're fairly sharp people, as they are wont to call it. This someone says, we have reached the point that we should be sophisticated and progressed enough that we should do something about these diverse opinions that serve no purpose, because no one can humanely, logically defend people fighting over religion. And all the sophisticated people in the city go, that's true. How are we going to fight over capitalism versus Marxism? That's ridiculous. We can't do that anymore, because that's true. Or people say, we can't continue to pollute the planet just for the sake of making a buck. We're all in this big old thing together. There we go. That's true. It is not all of that new for life to have certain people saying that. But now consider, on the basis of what I was trying to open this up with, that the diversity of man at the secondary level, in the secondary world, regarding all the conflicting desires, all of the conflicting interest that he has, and that people are arguing, right now forget for a second fighting, but the continual verbal barrage, the wrestling between peoples about their views. Consider that life is executing a most complex, a most comprehensive cross-pollination of cerebral energy, attempting to mark off a territory in somebody else's intellect, and them doing it to you, and them doing it to somebody else, and then you doing it to somebody else, and then you doing it to everybody, and everybody doing it to you. It is a kind of continual cross-fertilization, pollinization. It is the ultimate drive toward a kind of intermarriage of everybody. It is an execution and an exchange of energy, whereas there was this guy that one time said that why else would life have invented chocolate and vanilla unless it wanted to find out which one was best? All of the conflicting desires, interests, and opinions, beliefs of everybody, and everyone attempting to either share their view with somebody else, to argue somebody else's view, to try and reinforce their own view, to try and change someone else's view, and then you having to deal with the whole world, if you had time to talk to them, attempting to do the same thing to you. At the secondary level, just consider it at the intellectual level now, not the primary level of actually fighting for existence and survival, but here, rather than there being some sort of question, rather than there being this belief that you could say that this is strictly in parentheses and then quotation marks, that you could say, thank God, never happened, has not happened. But this kind of expression that there are too many unprofitable beliefs. And there is, I already mentioned that we've got to outgrow this. Can you not see, rather than talking about outgrowing unprofitable conflicting beliefs, that that is growth itself? That it's as though life is thrown through man's nervous system every possible flavor, not just chocolate and vanilla, but every possible, you might think, idea of gods, of political systems, economic systems, that everybody on this planet in some way has at least a slightly different song to sing about. I'll tell you what kind of guy I am. Then let's assume that everybody is as slightly different. Do you not see the rich field that life has to ultimately harvest from? That people are cross-pollinating one another. It doesn't matter. Of course, this gets beyond the three-dimensional level. The cross-pollination is not the same thing that would actually be going on in the animal world. That is, by you talking to someone else and say, let me tell you, you have got the wrong opinion about the polyester economic system. And I will straighten you out. And you tell the person. And they listen. They listen. You get through and they say, well, you're wrong. I mean, I followed what you were saying, but I've heard that kind of crap before. I don't, you may think you thought that up, but that's just not true. It's not true. And they leave. So you might say, well, it didn't work. You missed it. It's not the same thing as a little bee trying to fly into a flower and it flies in. Let's say that it was life, whether the bee knew or not, of course, is purposefully trying to get the little bee to pick up some pollen and go over to another one, and he gets in there, and picking up pollen would be like him trying to change the flower's mind. In the same way as the polyester economic theory. And the flower didn't want to play. And you could say the bee leaves and he didn't accomplish anything. There is no exact parallel to people talking, because if you told the other person that, and they begin to mark off their territory physically while you're telling them your opinion, and they listen, and you can say, well, it served no purpose. I buzzed in, tried to cross-pollinate, tried to help my fellow man, tried to give him the benefit of my superior insight into this problem, and he rejected it. You missed it. If people are talking, by talking I mean there's an energy exchange, that you're talking and somebody's actually listening a little bit. Don't worry about how much. If they're listening, cross-pollination is going on. Even if they verbally say, all right, I heard all that, but I reject it. You're incorrect. What do you mean I'm incorrect? I'm majored in this. I wrote a little paper on this. Well, I don't care if you wrote a big paper on it. You're wrong. I don't have to take this kind of crap from you. I know where you went to school. I am not wrong. Well, and the guy said, I don't want to talk about it. And so he leaves. But something happened, because your name will come up now, and he'll go, oh, no, not him. Is he still trying to peddle that theory about the pollination is going on, and it is not open to three-dimensional judgments and standards about what's working and what's not working. It's all fucking working. If it's working, it's working. That is, if it's in operation, it's working. You don't have a choice. Not an ordinary intellect. You can't say, well, wait a minute, nobody's going to cross-pollinate my brain. Could be, but there it is. In a non-animal, a non-primary, a non-somatic manner, relatively speaking, that is to say, that there is another, I'll give it just an everyday description with a slight twist with the adjectives. It is a kind of intellectual process we're talking about, an intellectual process, not physical, not animal, but of natural selection. Survival of the fittest. It is life. For those of you who don't recall, I said we had covered it once, twice. It is as though, from one view, quite valid, that life has thrown out every possible idea in the world. That is, every possible burst of energy right until today that's possible for the human nervous system at the brain level to deal with. It's as though all of us at the intellectual level, secondary level, are out there chickens, and life throws out every possible combination of chicken food to see what will happen. To see which chickens survive, which get fat. The chickens that eat certain ideas, which wander off, get skinny, get sick, cough a lot. That literally is one description of the history of man. And the ideas, please note, seem to be exempt from any straight line phenomenon, because some ideas that seem true then become false. Some ideas that seem acceptable, that is, they are healthy and seem to fatten up the chickens 100 years later, sometimes even sooner than that nowadays. But obviously in history, 200 and 300 years later, the very ideas that seem to fatten some group up now would be starvation wages. There is survival, and it feeds the secondary world. And the survival has to do with which particular areas are being marked off by what particular group trying to do it to some other group. And this doesn't have to be in any wide range. It can be happening in one locale. Besides the somewhat general level that I was speaking of just then, the collective level of life intellectually through man trying to discover and then trying to use the superior ideas, at least for this time, for this place. That is, trying to produce its own survival of the intellectual fittest at that time. Besides that sort of general operation for people collectively, there is going on at the individual level. Each person attempting, through the conveying of their own intellectual information energy, that is, attempting, as we were talking about, to mark off into other people's minds. Each person, without knowing it, is attempting to evolve, to develop even recreate themselves through this marking off, through the impression that they apparently make on other people's minds. That's certainly far beyond anything that psychology or ordinary conventional wisdom has ever talked about. But as we were also noting a few nights ago, there is a way in which to consider, once you see it, the secondary world as being almost man creating, in quotation marks, if you insist, creating another world after his own physical birth, after his primary birth. Is the secondary world is man creating it, because if you do not have man, this should be self-evident. At the three-dimensional level, it is reasonable once you see it, defensible to your own even city-wide, city-level intellect, that there would be no secondary world. There would be no world of man if it weren't for man. If we took man off the planet in some way, slipped off and hid behind the moon and looked down here right now, I assume that you would agree, by all apparent evidence, that within any reasonable length of time, the raccoons would not suddenly begin to marry, start dealing with ores in the ground, try and domesticate cattle, build cities. The world of man seems to be unique to man. There would be no secondary world were it not for man. So you can look at man as being, at a secondary level, a creator. That the stuff was here, of course, and everything we got came out of the ground. Everything we got came from the primary level, no matter how sophisticated it is, rockets to the moon, computers, microscopic surgical instruments, all of it was dirty. You know what I mean? It was all dug out of the ground. It was just big old lumps of stuff. It was all just laying there. You've been walking on it, raccoons walk on it, dogs pee on it. There it is. It all came from there. So when I say it created the secondary world, of course you've got to do your fingers like that, which is a lot of fun. Especially if you're, I assume, a monk or on a desert island. So there's a way in which to literally see that the world of man is a kind of secondary creation, that man is a small-time God, that he is creating this secondary world. But beyond what seems to be this secondary world, of all this stuff and our clothes, and beyond that, the marking off in other people's minds of a territory to help establish in their memory, in their consciousness, in their mind, some part of it is now stuck with you, for good or bad, from the 3D view, whether they think you're a nut or whether they think, hey, he's all right. It doesn't matter. The dog doesn't care once it pisses on a bush, whether the bush goes, boy, you know, you're worse than me and the other dog. Who cares? Or a dog comes by later. It's not a matter of degree. It's not a relative matter of good or bad. It's a matter of remembers you and they hate your guts. Every time they think about you, they throw up. It's pollution. Pollinization. In that same sense, there is a way in which you can see, not just trying to prove some point, because it is operational and you can see part of what is driving man, is this attempt to mark off a territory in other people's intellect, in their mind, in their memory of you, is in a quite specific way an attempt to help recreate yourself. All right, I'll make it easy. Now don't ignore this. Don't just look at it and laugh as though it's some sort of sarcastic observation of humanity, because it's not. But think about this. Because people do it, and it would sound as though it would be open to a criticism. People talk to one another. Would this be a safe statement, just in general? That they talk to one another more about themselves changing than anybody actually changes. Did anybody hear it? A long time ago, I brought up an example. I said there was a guy I knew, and nobody seemed to find any humor. Well, maybe somebody laughed. I don't think anybody got it. And I said there was a guy, he was a good, solid chain smoker. But almost any time you'd see him, if you hadn't seen him in a few months, he would make some comment about, I quit smoking. Within minutes, he would ask you if you had a cigarette. You still don't particularly like it, do you? Maybe it's too extreme. But notice, people talk about, to themselves, but they talk to each other about change. Oh, all right. People talk continually to each other about, yes, I'm going to lose some weight. I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to quit drinking. Do they not? Just go out and stick your ear out in the marketplace, out in the street. And that's what's going on. But does everybody who says they're going to lose weight, lose weight? I don't think so. Does everyone who says, God, I drink too much, I'm going to quit drinking? Does everybody who say that quit drinking? I don't think so, etc. So you could say why I said that if it was an ordinary person hearing that, they might say, well, you're just pointing out the frailty of man. No, because it's not a waste of time. It's not the frailty of man. You do not see that if you tell somebody else, maybe you just see them once every few months, once every few years, and you say, I am going to quit drinking. You remember the times we used to have when we were younger, and they're going, yeah, well, I guess I've been drinking too much, catching up, well, I'm going to quit drinking. Well, I'm proud of you. You know, I really am. And the person leaves and you don't see them for years, maybe ever again. But you understand that a piece of you, in a sense, got recreated. The person says, can you really stop drinking that just like that? Oh, yeah, I've done it before. I don't know. I've been at pressures when I went back, but I hadn't had a drink in weeks. You know, whether this is true or not, if the other person believes it. They're just in town maybe for the night, and you hadn't seen them in years, and maybe you're still a lush. But in the few hours you're with them, you don't drink. And they say, well, you know, last time I saw you, you were drinking pretty heavy. And I tell you the truth, I was worried about you. Well, I was too. But you can tell I pulled myself together. And the person believes it. Don't miss it. Don't say, well, wait a minute, that's some kind of lie. You people still don't believe in that kind of crap, do you? It's not a lie. What if the other person goes, huh? Then you can get into matter of degrees. You can say, well, we can't be convinced. We can't prove that the other person absolutely believed you, because some little part of them might go, he could be just telling me that. It doesn't matter. The point is, you have marked off some space that they say, you were really drinking heavy. Yeah, you're right. I remember the last time you were here. You know, whether you do or not, maybe it's a blackout, but you say, and it wasn't long after that, I quit. You mean just quit cold? Yeah, did it. Jeez. Well, you always did have a certain kind of willpower. I always admired that in you. And so you wave him off on the bus. You know, come see me next time you're with it. And the person has an area marked off now. And it's not a matter, let's say that you're still drinking. It just as soon as he gets out of sight, you know, you got a half pint in your pocket. God, I'm glad he's gone. I was dying for a drink. All right, an ordinary person could say, well, this just shows that, you know, the world is just all screwed up and humanity's going to hell and things are all messed up. It's a lot of fun being here with a population of 15 billion children. I really enjoyed being here. That was just a little joke, say. Because there's nothing wrong. There's nothing being wasted. Territory is being marked out, energy is being transferred, and it's got nothing to do with what people are pleased to call in the city the truth, reality, lies. Part of the talk is to mark off territory. Remember, that's where we started. Now, I didn't say mark off territory that was true. I didn't say mark off territory that was good territory. It's to make impressions on other people's intellect. I didn't say good impression. I didn't say bad impression. It's got nothing to do. It's beyond all of that to say, well, wait a minute. Now, you could say that you made an impression on that guy's mind, but you did it by lying to him. That's right. Some urine is of great value and some is not. Well, you see, that's not going to fly. But once you get past that kind of physical level, if you've got an ordinary intellect, then you can't see them where you think, but there's a whole lot of difference than a dog taking a leak on a bush to mark off his territory than it is you're talking about something serious, about somebody quitting drinking, or somebody talking about going to convert to a religion, something serious. And well, excuse me. I surely do not have to rub your nose in the bush, do I? For you to see that part of the continuing flux of energy, the interchange, also happens right there. If I had ordinary intellects and they were listening to this for what silly reason, they'd get right there, and if they almost heard it, then life would shake them out of it because they go, well, wait a minute. Something's wrong. That is not the way life should operate. For what, if I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm speaking for an ordinary person listening to this. And they said, because you're saying then that any kind of impression that one person makes on another one verbally, let's say not physically, that you don't beat somebody up, but just intellectually, that you say something to them like, yeah, I quit drinking. Or you tell somebody that you just met at a bar, I'm part of the third generation of the Rockefellers. Don't tell anybody here, I'm trying to keep it down. Really? And you can say, well, wait a minute, you made an impression on somebody, if that's what you're saying, but you lied to them. Now you say, okay, I know what you're saying, you lied to them, but you don't say any more than that. And then you go, well, I see that that you're making an example that somebody lied to them, and if you're supporting that, you're as crazy or as evil or bad as they are. You're nuts. And see, then you're safe if you're ordinary. Because life is wired up to tell people's intellect that something is wrong, that you just can't say, well, energy is getting transferred and you're marking off a space for you in somebody else's brain, but you did it through subterfuge. Never mind. You did it through lies. And boy, that's not right. And of course, if that's all you're wired up to, there is no response to that. I understand that. I know that. But yeah, you're right. But be that as it may, friends and neighbors, the person can lead. The person can even find out later that you did lie, right? The territory may be even more saturated with verbal urine now. If you tell them something, the person goes, wow, and they leave and you marked off a territory by lying. Let's say that a week later, they're talking about you and something that what you told them, and somebody says, he told you that? Jesus Christ. And maybe 4 or 5 people bear witness and say, he lied to you. That's not true. He played you for a sucker. Then the other person goes, Jesus, I don't like that kind of crap. Somebody do that to me. All it is after the fact. It's like now it's raining verbal urine on them. Because now they really marked you down. You have a place in their heart. That's poetic. What you've got is a place, you have got a firing pattern in their brain. And it is a form of recreating yourself. And don't say now, yeah, but the guy's got a bad opinion of you. But the thing is, he has got an opinion of you. He now thinks more of you than you actually are. Well, yeah, but he thinks more of me in a bad sense. No, you missed it. You're now bigger than you actually are. All right, I can put it to you another way, if you won't let it throw you, but I'm going to do it anyway. In the secondary world, you can say that men exist. Well, especially in the secondary world, because there's other aspects to it that I'm not going into, but some of you already have placed it together, that men exist, but especially in the secondary world, at least partially, in the minds of others. All right? Give you a variation then. It might be easier to see. There's old everyday axioms that go something like this. I'm not sure I can think of one exactly, so I'll make up like a grandfather, a potpourri, a melange, an oleo, a mulligan stew. But it would go like this kind of axiom that says, no man is better than he believes his neighbor's opinion of him is. How about that? And don't write me about ending the sentence with is. Because I said it was every day. That's the way people talk. They believe that kind of stuff. But do you understand there is validity at the ordinary level to say that no man, psychology, if I've changed the terminology or the description a little bit, contemporary psychology would support that no man is better, or no man believes he's better, than he also believes that his neighbor's opinion of him is. Now that is not psychological. There, if you can, once you see it, there is a quite hard 5-dimensional scientific basis for that. It's not just an axiom. And it's not just, I repeat, there's more than just the secondary aspect to this, because there is a genetic connection, especially at the family level. But that in a sense, even at that level, but I wasn't going into it, that people partially exist in the lives of others. But especially at the secondary level, you exist in a sense, at the secondary level, partially in the minds of other people. If all you had was secondary intelligence and you were just run of the mill, you could not live in isolation. You could not bear being a true hermit. And it doesn't count to be a hermit when you're 30, by the way. You got to start out and be a hermit when you're 2 or 3 years old. Ordinary intelligence cannot stand that, because you exist at the level of being human, not animal, not mineral. That is, the secondary level, you operate, you exist partially. This is not psychological, it's not hocus pocus, it is a physical fact. But it's beyond the 3D dimension to perceive. You exist partially in the minds of others. That is partially where you exist, and without it you would not be complete at the ordinary level. Thus you're dealing with almost everything you say at the ordinary level, and almost everything that is said to you is people attempting all the way to from reinforcing where they believe they've marked off in you, the partial part of their existence that is dependent upon your mind, all the way from that to increasing. That is what I mean by recreating, of increasing themselves, by telling the person tells you what new they've done, not just stop drinking. It's not just negative. The person you hadn't seen in months or years, they say, since I saw you last, what was I doing last time? You say, well, you just started on your master's. That's right, that's what I thought. And the other person waits, or you wait, and the person says, well, it's only been less than a year. I got my doctor's. And you go, wow. It is a form of recreating oneself. And it's not just that this other person got their doctors and now make more, got a better position, better standing in their community, which is the same thing as existing partially in somebody else's mind. But now with you, at the individual level, the territory they used to marked out. You grew up and you were friends, you were in undergraduate school together, you're in high school together, and then you kind of get split up and he's on the other side of the country. But now every time you see each other, you help recreate. He says, I do have my doctors, and I'm expecting to get tenure, maybe just a year, but at Northwestern University. And you go, wow. And maybe you hug the person, physically or otherwise, and you're saying, God, I couldn't be happier for you. The person is recreating themselves. They are getting bigger. But not just that they got bigger by having a PhD, that they got a bigger paycheck. Part of the getting bigger, part of the expansion, part of the growth is the territory they had marked out in your mind is now expanded. And he says, well, enough about me. What have you been doing? And so you help recreate yourself. You tell what kind of guy you are. You tell what kind of guy you are anew. Or what kind of guy you are that is different than it was the last time that you and this person went through this energy transfer. With very little exception, which is no exception, the talk that goes on amongst humans is a continuing attempt. Life-driven is not your prerogative to do it or not do it, but the talk, the swap of opinions, the conflicting opinions, one person holding one belief, one or another, somebody believing that there's such and such, somebody next to them saying, well, you're not that way. Yes, I am. It is an attempt being driven by life for you to mark off territory in somebody else's nervous system to help establish you. And they're doing the same thing to you. And all the conflicting opinions, all of the diversity that would seem to be unprofitable from certain levels of ordinary intelligence is not true. It is a continuing strawing out of fertilizer. It's cross-pollination. Everybody intellectually is screwing everybody else, attempting to. You're attempting, the drive is just as strong. Some of you didn't, maybe I shouldn't have said knickers for you Americans. But the drive to get into other people's minds is as strong as it is at the sexual level for people to get in each other's pants. It is just as strong, and if you don't see that, you're not going to see anything. Because nowadays it is, in a sense, stronger, because sex is not that hard to come by. As young as some of you are, maybe that even sounds silly, but it's like your parents' generation, that at least in this part of the world, it was known as being the Eisenhower years, and by all reports, nobody was actually screwing, so I don't know what happened. But at any rate, the point is, sex is no longer any more of a big deal than it is going out for dinner. So what is it people do now? It is not just being able to hold out or tempt one another sexually. People do it verbally. Now, ordinary people might call it psychologically, but it's all verbally because you can't have no psychologically without no verbally. I know it's technical talk. I hate to fall back into technical talk, but that is what it is. It is now people dealing with each other. Going to bed with somebody nowadays is no big deal, but it's talking to them beforehand. And it's not sexual foreplay anymore, in a sense. It is territorial foreplay. That you want to help establish who you are in their mind, in their intellect, and they do it to you. And then if you've got enough time, you say, hey, you want to go to bed? Oh, okay. That is part of that is right now at the heart of the growth, the fertilization, the intercourse, the pollinization, the expansion of the secondary world is people talking. But notice, as we've been pointing out, how easy it happens, but how easy it would be to stand here, and if ordinary people are hearing this, to take all this and to kind of slap your knee and get a sarcastic grin and say, boy, you hit humanity on the head. Modern day people are a bunch of, Jesus, they're nothing, a bunch of intellectual squirts. You're right. They're out there. They don't know what the hell they're doing. That's not what this is saying. Life knows exactly what it's doing. But the idea that there is conflict going on that's meaningless, or the idea that there's conversations going on that are simply vacuous, ego-driven, or my term that we keep using of tell you what kind of guy you are. Boy, you can snarl your lip up and look like, if Elvis is not alive, he's come back in your lip and went, boy, you're right. People, everybody's going around saying, I tell you what kind of guy I am, trying to impress each other. That's not worthy of attack. That is life. And anybody who doesn't see that, or anybody who wants to get a little bit better, as always, may I make at least one final hand gesture and say, instead of worrying about all the conversation and everything out there, could we go, are you going to tell me that you don't do that to you? Well, no, that's silly. I almost can't believe that I'm listening to what you said about people doing out there to each other, but now you're going to say I do it to me? Well, you do. You have to think at the ordinary level. You could not think the nervous system chemically, electrically, would not operate were you not attempting to cross-pollinate yourself, to pull your intellectual self together, to get smarter, to understand what's going on, to help reinforce the opinions you have that are correct, fill in the blanks, what few there are, of things you don't understand, and of course to defend and trying to help re-educate the people who do not have correct opinions and knowledge. And you don't have to talk to anybody to do it. You can just do it in here. You can watch TV, you can listen to somebody talk, you can read something, or you just think about something you heard and think, Jesus, the whole world's nuts. Of course, except me. But you are now attempting to recreate yourself in here. You don't need somebody else just at that level. But you're doing it to yourself. Everybody is at the ordinary level. That's what keeps the secondary intellect running. That's what keeps the stadium full of people back at the old site cheering, playing the game. The bands come on, the bands go off, run on a team, somebody gets crippled, throw them out, bring in somebody else. But no matter where you look, you're always wearing the same uniform. It's always the same game going on. The score is never final, well, except the big score coming up when they seem to take you off the field, but we don't go into that. But up until then, it's just the same game over and over and over and over. And every time you think, well, it's a 7th inning stretch, and therefore 2 more innings, we're over. And it's like 2 more innings get further and further away. Well, since we're still taping these, is why I keep looking out for you people that these ever get shown. Trying to make them fit into a format, temporally speaking. It's certainly verbal, it doesn't fit into a format. Or if it does, maybe we'll call this New Age Pee-wee's Playhouse. How about that? Don't take it serious, I just kidding in the last 90 seconds here. Leave them laughing. I think I'll just stop. That's the benefit we have here that they can't actually do on the networks, isn't it? Because they'd have dead air. And around here we know there is no such thing as dead air, because something's going on. Hark! I hear someone silently telling me what kind of guy they are. And God, is it boring? Oh, I mean, meaningful. I'm sorry, meaningful. Hello? Hello? Come in.